Brexit. Aisha, you're on.
Oh yeah, so last week on Thursday was the deadline for large companies to report their gender pay gap, how much they pay their men and how much they pay their women. Last year was the first time this country had done it, and it's kind of really showed that things are sort of stuck, if not moving backwards. I think fewer than half of the UK's biggest employers said that they had succeeded in narrowing the pay gap. And I think it's quite a problem because, you know, the pay gap is something which will take quite a long time to change, but it's a signal of other things that are going on in an organisation and in our country in terms of structural inequality. And a lot of the issues behind the pay gap are things like good quality, well-paid, flexible working, part-time working, men doing more of the childcare. Lots of men do want to do more of the childcare, to be fair, better sort of childcare, and also getting women into more senior positions of leadership.
Which a riveting piece of information has come to light on the SNPs website, where they have revealed to the public that they are going to continue their fight to reduce the gender pay gap. You know, this is the next best thing to communism. Instead of expecting everybody to be paid the exact same, regardless of what job they do, they just expect equal representation to be forced into every single aspect of society, provided it pays well. So they go on to say here that according to new analysis, increasing the female employment rate, closing the gender pay gap in Scotland could provide an economic boost of 15 billion, equivalent to 9% rise in GDP. Yes, any old statistic to justify your incessant drive to force women into every aspect of society at the peril of men. Last month, Scotland was named the best country in the UK for gender equality in the workplace, and that really was a wonderful moment for us all, as it became crystal clear that we are on our way to becoming the world's most progressive institution. The UK was ranked 13th in the world. SNP government has achieved more in Scotland when it comes to equality than the painfully slow progress Westminster's delivered. Oh, is that so? And when you mean equality, all I really gather from this, because of the current day that we live in and reality, and instead of the fabricated bubble that the SNP and the diehards live in, all that really means is you've forced people in via quota systems, and your desperate drive to bump up representation somehow equates to equality. If anything, all it is a modern day variation of a token insert here. You know, that's all it is really. You're forcing people into certain job roles. You're pressuring companies to promote people on the basis of their skin colour and their gender. And you think that's equality? I don't think it is. But of course, it's an excuse, isn't it, to continue the never-ending flow of money pumped into all your feminist organisations, because as long as they exist and as long as the gender pay gap exists, inequality is rampant. So, the painfully slow progress Westminster's delivered, demanding that all public authorities with more than 20 employees publish a pay gap every 2 years, doubling funding to support businesses led by women. Of course, you're doubling funding to businesses led by women, because what fucking better way to achieve equality than to double the funding for businesses led by women? You know, how are the men who run their own businesses going to cope without double the funding? That's alright, because they're men, I suppose. All the equality, I see it from here. I'm so proud. And establish a women's returner scheme. With full power, Scotland could lead the way in tackling gender inequality, because it's such a prevalent problem that only representation quotas can fix. Scotland could lead the way, apparently, with something which will hugely benefit our workers, businesses and economy. Said nobody ever, bar a feminist. Wow, man. So all this talk of closing the supposed gap, the gender gap, that really doesn't equate to what they like to pretend it equates to. They welcome the new pay transparency measures as an important first step in addressing the systemic inequality women face at work. All that rampant systemic inequality. You know, when John works as a man in the warehouse of Tesco's and Janet works behind the till and they get paid differently, that somehow equates to inequality in the workplace, and it's so prevalent and so disastrous and cancerous, it's actually systemic. That's why we need to close the gap to fix the problem. But the fundamental weakness is that the employers aren't required to take action that will close the gap. And how do you think that you could close said gap? I can think of a few reasons as to forcing your way or speeding up the process. You could either A, bump up the overall wages of women-dominated fields that don't pay too much. You could B, force women into jobs instead of men, prioritising, which is discrimination. But of course that won't stop you. You could of course double your funding for businesses led by women, I suppose. And we all know that they're going to go on and hire women. You know, that's all I can really think of. And each and every one of those methods is anything but equality. It's anything but equal. You can't really close a gap. You can't fix a problem that doesn't exist. That's what I'm trying to say. You know? If a company has 20 individuals working for them, 5 of them happen to be paid an exponential amount more than the rest of them because they are at the top of the career ladder in that particular business, and then you compare their wages to the rest of the company, you'll see a disparity. But these feminists go a step further than that, and then they will compare the people at the top to the people at the bottom, and if they're women and men at the top, you know. But it doesn't actually equate to inequality. It just literally shows that there's a discrepancy or a difference in pay between the people that are dotted around the company and the people at the top, or people in certain aspects of the company that are getting paid more. It doesn't equate to women getting paid less because they're women. The Gender Equality Act requires large private and third sector groups to report information on mean and median gender pay gap figures, the proportion of men and women workers in different pay grades, and inequality in bonus payments. Some of the findings from last year show that 78% of large firms admitted they paid men more. No, they don't just pay men more though, it's illegal. The average pay gap reported so far is 9.1%, and we all know how they come to these averages and these statistics. It's been debunked so many times, and now instead of peddling the same shit that they're being paid differently for doing the exact same job, they're now running with the narrative that was actually used as a means to debunk their original claims. You know, they're running with this pay gap of overall wages in comparison as their new narrative, as their new reason to complain, when that was the reason, that was the justification that was thrown at them to debunk the original claim that they were paid differently for doing the exact same job on the basis of their gender. So they'll always find a reason to fucking complain. Unequal pay is illegal under the Equal Pay Act of 1970. Well, there you go then, end of fucking article. However, the information reported confirms that women's rights have argued for years that women receive less in pay from work due to lower rates of promotion. Here, see what I mean? Lower rates of promotion, more likely to be employed only part-time, often due to family and caring commitments, and being employed at lower levels in companies and industries. So it's not a case of being paid differently for the same job. You're now actively or openly admitting that there is reasons that clearly indicate the supposed gender pay gap that you speak of, but yet you allow the narrative to make it seem as if it's still the original claim and concern that he's had. The gender pay gap makes it sound a lot worse than it actually is. They don't get paid, they don't get employed or promoted enough in comparison to their counterparts, the male counterparts. But I mean, even that in itself, you need to do a bit of digging into that. It's not just as clear cut as saying that, how many men are in said company that we're speaking of here. In comparison to that, how many women are in the company. And then it would stand to reason if there's more men in the company than women, then the women getting employed, promoted, would be at a lower rate than in comparison to men, because there's more men. Stands to reason. So how do you defeat this gender pay gap? Well, of course, this justifies the feminist plight. This is a legal means for feminism to really do what it wishes to do, but openly this time, because it's solving a fucking pay gap apparently, and that's to shit on men and force women into every aspect of society as quickly as possible. And of course that is exactly what is happening, because it's the only way to solve the pay gap. This pay gap that they openly admit now has got nothing to do with being paid differently, and everything to do with a multitude of factors that come into effect, factors that they wish to quell or stop or reverse or switch, whatever it may be. But unless you force women into certain aspects of society, you pressure companies into hiring more women, and you bump up the pay in women-dominated fields, or I suppose you could try and get men to become stay-at-home dads, because for some reason you think that that's just going to be as clear-cut as you make it out to be. Nonetheless, unless you start doing all of those very unequal things, I don't see how you're going to achieve your equality. But of course, here you go, the intensive lobbying from feminists and women's rights groups. Gender and Scotland's women's budget group, the Scottish Government launched an action plan to tackle the gap across a range of social factors, including societal expectations of women in education. Oh yes, that's right, that's why they've interfered now with the curriculum that will be coming to a school near you soon, where they're going to teach little boys that they should really think about becoming stay-at-home dads, or it's okay to cry, and it's okay to become a part-time teacher, while they tell the girls to get heavily involved in sports, that they can become firewomen, or they can be policewomen, they can go into the STEM fields, etc., all of course while they get their hand held by all the feminist organisations, because it's all about solving and quelling some supposed myth that there was a prevalent problem with inequality in society. A gender pay gap. Oh, the gender pay gap. Justifying feminism. Yep.